Hello again. This is Nick Roach. We're outside again. It's a bit windy. Hopefully we'll be okay with the sound. And the dog's barking. Today I'd like to say a little bit, or entitle the talk, "The world is made of emotion." The world is made of emotion. Now this is quite a close subject to me, for me, because after 25 years of living this, being this, sinking into the one being, which of course is for you, your being, but for me it's here, sinking into the one being, the knowledge that everything is emotion, made of emotion, by emotion, for emotion, the knowledge that everything is emotion is now so obvious to me, so blatant I can't see it any other way, and nor would I wish to. It's just obvious. And yet I've come an unusual path. Very few spiritual seekers, teachers, gurus, enlightened people, whichever term one wishes or whichever group one looks at, very few have followed a path of consciously facing and dissolving the emotion. For a lot of them apparently had some experience, whether due to extreme trauma, facing imminent death, extreme pain, or just walking along one day and something clicks and it happens. And for them, of course, that is it. There's nothing to teach. It just happens when it happens. And when I talk about the emotion, I've had teachers say to me, "I don't know about that. I teach whichever philosophy, teaching or non-teaching, that it just happens and there's nothing you can do. I don't know about the emotions. It's not part of my life." So I'm quite unusual in this. And even those people who aren't particularly interested or consumed by the idea of it just happening, still when I say it's all due to the emotion and teach how to dissolve the emotion, I've been asked a few times recently, "Nick, what do you mean by the emotion? What is emotion to you, which you say is creating all of this?" So here's the video. Now it starts at the very obvious. To me, emotion is, I'm going to assume, what emotion is to you. When you're unhappy, angry, frightened, worried, and whatever other emotions I can't think of right now, whatever feeling you get, an attachment to something that's going to happen, looking forward to something, worried about something that has happened, whatever it is, an attachment to a situation and a feeling you get, a stimulation inside, most people would agree that is emotion, a feeling. So we'll start with that, okay? That is emotion. Cool. And at this moment, if there's no attachment in your mind to anything going on past or future, there's nothing happening inside you, you might say, "I'm not emotional now though." Now let's look at that for a moment if we can. The therapists, if anyone goes to therapy and counsellors to deal with their past, what's happened is even when you're not emotional at any moment, it's widely accepted that every time throughout your life that you've become upset, angry, frightened, at least particularly in quite a major way, it almost, they would say, causes a scar within you. There's an unhappiness. That memory of the emotion gets stored. And therapies often describe carrying a rucksack of rocks on one's back. And every time one is unhappy, angry, or any other emotion, this rock gets added to the rucksack, and one gets heavier and heavier and heavier. And just because you can't feel it in any set moment, this is in the unconscious, driving the thinking mind. And it affects the way one thinks, the thought process, the interpretation of whether events are good and bad, the body language, the whole thinking process, how agitated they are about things or how relaxed they are about things. When they see an event or reminded of an event, they can get upset or angry or frightened or worried because it stimulates this memory of something that happened a long time ago. I think it's starting to rain now. I can just see specks. We'll see how we go. So most people would say, okay, I'm not emotional now, but I accept there is emotion in me somewhere, in my unconscious mind. I'm just not aware of it. I can't feel it. Okay, bear with me. This will all make sense. Very simple, really. Like everything once it's pointed out. So we've got emotion is when you feel it, but there's also emotion there all the time which you can't feel. The next is a bit of a leap until you know it for yourself. For most people, when something happens outside of them in a situation, they become emotional. They feel the emotion, it rises up, and they know, I got unhappy about that because that happened. What people don't generally know, even the people who accept, believe, have realised everything is one, everything's connected, they don't realise, don't want to know. I say that because when I tell them, they literally don't want to know. That it's the emotion inside, deep inside, where they can't feel it, literally is creating the situation outside. As within, so without. There's one being here. Don't take my word for it, but if you accept or know, have realised there's one being here, then you know it's not me. Because you can feel inside where you're aware that you exist and you know that you are here. So if you are here, then you must be it. You are the one being. So you know you are it, so you know I'm not it. Or anybody else you know or see, you know that you are it, the one being. And within this one being, which you are, emotions and feelings arise and fall, depending on partly your thought process, but a lot what happens outside of you. And as the one being, at the moment, you believe they're separate. One happens, the situation, and that causes a feeling. And whether the feeling happens or not, as far as you're concerned, let's say, is irrelevant to the situation. The situation happens independently. And I'm here to say that is not the case. That is not the case. The emotion comes first. We've already said you can't feel it. A lot of the time it's already there. The emotion is deep inside the one being, the one mind that you are, the unconscious. It's there now. And what happens is when an attachment to a situation arises within the being, the emotion underneath the surface creates the situation outside. So the situation outside happens, and then the emotion under the surface, which was creating it, is then brought to the surface by the situation it has created. And then you have the choice, of course, now that you know there's a choice, of either to go into the imagination and think about the problem, or hold the emotion, as I've taught in several other videos already. Hold the emotion, hold the mind still, and you're dissolving the energy, not just the emotion that you're feeling, but it's the very energy that's creating and created the situation. It's the one energy. Dissolve the emotion, you dissolve the situation. That's what I mean by the world is made of emotion. And by the world, in this case, I'm talking the whole physical environment, not just the man-made world, because we know that's made of emotion. But the whole physical environment, for the moment you wake up in the moment and open your eyes, and there it is around you. That is the emotion left over from the day before inside you. When you open the eyes, and the emotion creates environment to continue the one dream that you were having before. This. And if we use the dream analogy, because that's how this came to me, when you're asleep in bed, to help you understand this, when you're asleep in bed having a dream, who or what is dreaming and who or what is creating the dream? And I'd like you to look at that for a moment. When you're asleep in bed having a dream and you're unconscious in the dream, who or what is creating it? Of course, the dream is happening within your own mind. That's obvious. You're not doing it consciously. You're not consciously creating it, so it's your unconscious. And a lot of the time, it's a situation, if you do manage to remember your dreams, that creates an emotional response, an emotional stimulation. So then we see, right, it's the emotion that's creating the dream when you're asleep in bed. And it's not a big stretch to see that, so it's the emotion all the time creating the dream, even when they're just mundane, rambling rubbish, some silly scenario. It's all created by the need, whatever attachment it was in you to experience that thing happening, it happened. Now we're back to the waking world. The same, one mind is creating everything within the unconscious. The need to experience, the attachment to being separate, the need to experience all this as being separate, the need to experience the continuation of events, of situations, and particularly when one is still getting very unhappy and emotional about things, the need to suffer. There's the attachment to suffering. No one wants it. Not consciously, no one wants it. But it is an addiction. But it's an addiction which eventually one grows out of when you've had enough. However long that may take. Because when an unhappy situation happens and the emotion comes up, we don't go generally, I don't want any unhappiness in me, I'm not accepting this, I'm going to hold it and dissolve it. Even when we know how to, even when I tell people how to, very rarely do they do it. When the emotion comes up, you hold it. Hold it still, not accepting unhappiness. in me, and eventually it dissolves. But we don't, do we? The emotion comes up and we feel unhappy and angry and worried and frightened, whatever it is, and then we go into the imagination and think about the thing, and it's like a merry-go-round of unhappiness going round and round, living, reliving and reliving and reliving this unhappiness which had just happened, instead of going, no, I'm not having it. I'm not having it. So what happens, back to the original point, the world is made of emotion. The emotion deep inside the unconscious mind, the psyche, the one mind, which is your mind, that creates a situation outside. It's actually creating the entire environment every single moment. But when we're talking about unhappiness, it creates a situation outside. And now the emotion is externalized, the situation. That stimulates the actual feeling itself connected to it. Now I can feel it. Exposes it. And then I can make that emotion conscious, and that will put an end to the situation. But if I don't, and I keep going into this the emotion, thinking and thinking, with putting all my awareness into the imagination, I've let go of the conscious awareness, that actually feeds the emotion which is creating the situation. So by thinking and worrying and thinking over and over, I'm feeding the very energy that's creating the outside problem. As within, so without. Now what happens when a person is in that state of awareness all the time? Let's say, when an emotional situation happens, something happens outside, and the emotion can still come up because one is still alive. While one has a body, there's still emotion, because it's the emotion creating the environment. I've already said that. So anybody, no matter how advanced spiritually they are, if they've got a body, there's still emotion there. So what happens is a situation happens outside and the emotion comes up. But the person is already aware, already here. They don't go into the imagination thinking and worrying and reliving it. They already see it. They're aware. Now even if they don't know they're doing this, and most people don't, by being aware they're not feeding the emotion, and the energy is quickly dissolved. So even in spiritual teachers, gurus, most advanced gurus ever, they may not know about this process, but they don't need to, because once you're in the state, it happens anyway. It's like the heart beating. You don't need to know your heart is beating for it to beat. And this is the same. You don't need to know about this for it to happen once you're there. But if you're not there already, if you're still in the emotional unhappiness and your life is difficult, painful, you're struggling, and perhaps the fact that you're watching this, you're looking for an end to the ups and downs of the emotion, want your life to become simpler, easier, more peaceful, then this is what you can learn to do. Purely just being conscious and aware, you will dissolve the emotion that's creating the pain and happiness in you, and the same emotion will dissolve, creating the external problems of your life. They are one and the same. Please don't separate them. Please don't separate them. Please don't think, I'll try to meditate, I'll try and become more spiritual, but the emotion just keeps happening, as if it's of no consequence, because the emotion is everything. This world, this physical existence, this physical environment is made of emotion, by emotion, because emotion is what needs to experience itself, expressing itself all the time, reliving. And the word karma is the emotion that hasn't yet been made conscious. So it keeps coming up again and again and again, the same emotion creating the same situations outside, until we make them conscious. The world is made of emotion. The physical existence is made of emotion, and it's not emotion out there somewhere. Please don't think that. It's the emotion inside you, under the surface right now, where you can't feel it. The one being that you are. That being is creating all of this within itself. Why? Because it needs to. What do I mean by it needs to? I'm talking about the emotion, the need to experience. And the need to experience something starts with being separate, and then the separation creates attachment to situations. This is all emotion within the one being. Sure, someone might start trying to divide it up into different levels and give the different bits of the physical reality the different bits names. That's all mind stuff. It's going to feed the mind, entertain and discuss it. You can do that if you want, but just be aware of being aware, the stillness inside that you are. And anything that happens in your life, you know it's the emotion inside you creating it, and you know what to do about it, don't you? Thank you.